said to them, "Therefore every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the master of a household, who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old." This is the word of the Lord.
How many of you fish? A few of you fish. What's the strangest thing you've ever caught fishing?
A skate.
Pardon me?
A skate.
A skate. A real fish skate or like a hockey skate? Real fish skate. I once caught a small shark, I think, a dogfish, near White Rock. I also caught a starfish. I don't think you're supposed to catch these things. I threw them both back. There's a lot of interesting life in the ocean. And Jesus tells a parable about the kingdom of heaven. And he says that the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. Now the Greek word for net used by Jesus is very specific, and it refers to a dragnet. You know what a dragnet is? The kind that you just drop in the water and you pull along the bottom that catches just about everything in its path. And if you think about it, that seems like a pretty weird image for the kingdom of heaven, doesn't it? The kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet, scraping along the bottom of the ocean, collecting everything in its path. It seems pretty indiscriminate. And yet that's what the parable says, that the net caught fish of every kind. I once read a story about shrimp fishermen in Florida who were shocked and surprised to find that they had landed a very rare goblin shark in their net among the shrimp. You got a picture of the goblin shark? If it pops up, you'll know, because it's pretty ugly. The goblin shark has this huge thing that comes out of its snout, and then all of its teeth are exposed, and it's a very, very unique looking and not very attractive fish. And they're the rarest sharks to be seen by human eyes, and this was the first sighting of a goblin shark in over 10 years. The bewildered fisherman took that shark and threw it back in the ocean. No word on if that shark survived. In marine terms, the most extreme form of a dragnet is called bottom trawling. Bottom trawling. Practice where heavy weights are put on the bottom of the net and everything is dragged along the seafloor, and it scoops up absolutely everything in its path, from the targeted fish to the fish or other things that are incidentally caught. It catches everything from centuries-old coral, it catches sea turtles, it catches all sorts of other marine animals like dolphins, seabirds. The net indiscriminately catches every life and every object that it encounters. And this collateral damage is called bycatch. And it can account for up to 90% of a trawl's total catch. So up to 90% of a trawl's total catch can be bycatch. It's not a pretty picture. It's not a pretty picture at all. But Jesus says that this is what the kingdom of heaven is like. Now there's more to the parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet that catches every kind of fish. But when the net is full, the fishermen draw it ashore, and then they put the good fish into baskets, but they throw out the bad. And, says Jesus, so it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the evil from the righteous, throw the evil into the furnace of fire where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So in a way, this parable of the kingdom is also about the end times of the coming judgment. The kingdom of heaven is like a net that catches every kind of fish, but there'll come a time when that fish will be hauled up, will be separated, the good from the bad. But it's also a parable about today. It's also a parable about today. That until that net is drawn up from the water and taken to the shore to separate the good from the bad, until that day, everything is just caught up together. Everything is caught up together. Similar to another parable that Jesus tells about the wheat and the weeds, right? And Jesus talks about a farmer who lets the weed and the weeds grow together until the harvest, because you really can't tell one from the other until the harvest. Only at the harvest does the farmer separate the wheat from the weeds. But there are differences in these parables. In that parable, it's an enemy that has sown the weeds among the wheat. But in this case, everything just indiscriminately is caught up, dragged into this net. The kingdom of heaven is portrayed as a willing decision to lump all things together. The kingdom of heaven is portrayed as a willing decision to lump all things together, to let the good and the bad coexist without assigning any origin to the bad. We don't know why things are bad. They just coexist until the time comes for the catch to be separated. So what Jesus seems to be saying here is that the kingdom of heaven, at least until the time of judgment, is characterized by the coexistence of just about anything and anybody that you can think of, all caught up in the same net. The kingdom of heaven isn't like a fisherman who takes a rod and fishes for one thing at a time, and if he doesn't like it, will throw it back until he catches what he wants. No, nothing gets thrown back. Everything is kept, at least for a time, until that net is pulled ashore. So if that's what the kingdom of heaven is like, if that's what the kingdom of heaven is supposed to be like, at least until judgment, and we know that we're living in a time when judgment has yet to take place, then isn't it saying that we as the church and we as the followers of Jesus, that we actually don't have any right and we don't have any business doing the separation? We don't have any right or business doing the separation, dividing what we think is the acceptable catch from that which we judge to be unacceptable. So you see, we don't get to make that choice. That's not our job. What the parable says is that at least until the time comes when Jesus and the angels will separate the catch, we live in a kingdom which is complicated and messy, to say the least. Maybe that explains a lot, doesn't it? If you've ever thought about what in the world is going on, why does God allow these things to happen? Why doesn't something happen? Maybe that explains a lot. The kingdom is indiscriminate for the time being. The kingdom is indiscriminate for the time being. 90%, up to 90% of what is caught by trawlers is bycatch, not the intended target. There is a percentage, perhaps a sizable percentage, only God knows, that are caught up in the net of the kingdom that won't make the final cut. But they are part of the catch, and they won't be separated just yet. The kingdom doesn't only contain people we think it might, but also lots and lots of people we just know that it shouldn't. There are sharks among the shrimp, but we don't get to throw them back. We have to live with them, side by side, all caught up in this net that's called the kingdom of heaven. You know, we've been asking the question, what do these parables of the kingdom mean for us, for those of us who live on the earth? And maybe it doesn't get any clearer than this. If the parables of the kingdom are meant to help us understand that the already present and continuing unfolding of the kingdom of heaven in our midst, if these parables are supposed to help us understand that, then what Jesus says about the kingdom being like the net tells us, I think, something about how we're to live and interact with the world around us. We as the church, we as Christians, don't get to choose who gets to be is the part of the kingdom. We don't get to choose that. We don't get to say some people belong and some people don't belong. Are there people, are there groups of people, are there kinds of people that we as the church would rather not have to deal with? Probably. I suppose there are. I'm pretty sure there are. It's different though who the undesirables are, who the deplorables are, depending on who you ask, right? But there's always someone, there's always some group, there's always some people that don't seem to be as welcome as others, or not welcomed at all. You know, in some churches, women have to sit on one side of the church and men sat on the other side. And it still happens in some churches today. In the past, people of color, slaves, had to sit at the back of the church if they were allowed in church at all. In some churches, people who were divorced were While they weren't explicitly shunned by the church, they might as well have been, given the way they were judged. Our churches still struggle with lots of issues, right? Lots of issues, including issues of sexuality. Who we think are desirable and acceptable and who we think aren't. But again, Jesus says that we don't get to decide. We don't get to decide. There will come a time when the net is pulled ashore and the sorting will take place. But that's not our task, and the sorting won't necessarily be done according to our standards. We don't know that. Our task is to exist together, the sinners and the saints, assuming you know which one is which, assuming you know which one you are. You know, it begs the question, who do you hang out with? Who do you hang out with? Who are your friends? What's your circle of friends like? Do they include those whose beliefs are different from yours? Whose outlook on religion or spirituality, on God, is different from yours? In your life, are you open to encountering people who may not agree or who might even be hostile to your convictions? Are you willing to wade into those places that make you feel uncomfortable? Or would you rather just stay among the safety of what you know, those you know, and who you're safe and secure with? Jesus says that the kingdom of heaven is like a net that catches fish of every kind. There's no sorting happening, not just yet. People are caught up in that net without discrimination. You might find yourself in that kingdom side by side with someone with whom you seem to have nothing in common. Why so indiscriminate? Why does Jesus say that the kingdom of heaven is like this? And maybe the answer is that, while fish don't change, while that goblin shark isn't going to become a shrimp from the time that it's caught up in that net to the time that they're hauled ashore and sorted, while fish don't change, people do, right? People do. People can change. People can repent. People can be transformed. Fish don't change their nature, but people can. People can. Maybe one of the reasons why the kingdom is like a dragnet is that those who are called and those who are equipped and those who can bear witness to those who need to hear the good news, can bear witness to those who need to experience the love and mercy and grace of Jesus Christ, those who need to know the hope of salvation. Maybe the reason the kingdom is the way it is that some people caught up in that net might still change. It might be because of other people caught up in that net with them, people like you and people like me, who can bear witness to Christ by the way we live with them, by the way we speak to them, by the way we treat them, by the way we love our neighbor as we love ourselves. Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the reason why we're all caught up in this together, because there's still time for people to change. Or maybe the kingdom of heaven is the way it is because we might change still. We might still repent. Our work is not in the sorting. How would we know who to keep and who to throw out? Right? Our work is not in the sorting. Jesus says, yeah, there'll come a time of reckoning, a time of judgment. But when that judgment comes, it's not us. We don't do the sorting. It's Jesus and those who serve him, the angels. It will be Jesus, according to his love and mercy and grace, who will determine who gets to stay and who gets thrown back. Jesus makes sure that we know that it's all headed somewhere, right? This isn't just some infinite loop that goes on and on and on. It's headed somewhere, right? There is a destination and there is a reckoning coming. Some look longingly to that time when that net will be hauled ashore and the sorting can begin, finding comfort in the eternal punishment that is promised for the wicked. But others are grateful that the present kingdom is a time when God's judgment and God's grace continue to be in conversation, and every person who is caught up in this net, is a person for whom Christ gave his life. No one knows when the net will be hauled ashore, but until then, this is what the kingdom looks like. Until then, this is what the kingdom looks like. It's messy. It's complicated. It continues to unfold, but it is not complete. We're all caught up together, intentionally, purposefully, by the grace of God, so that by the grace of God, there might be a change, maybe even in us. Thanks be to God. Amen.